Hey, I'm Jody Vance.
I'm George Affleck.
And it's time for
UnSpun.
And boy, George, after a little spring break, once again we find ourselves having to edit down what we can cover off in our 30 minutes of UnSpun podcast. And we have to start, I think, with federal politics. We'll get to both provincial here in BC and municipal, certainly.
Yeah, we're doing the whole gamut
today.
People
talking about George at City Hall. Interesting. We'll get to that. Stay with us on that one. But let's start with what has dominated the news without question for what it feels like is forever. But the controversy surrounding Jody Wilson-Raybould, the former Attorney General, then sitting in caucus, now ousted from caucus, as was Jane Philpott.
Now they're backbencher independents.
What does that mean exactly?
It means you really, they can do whatever they want. They don't have to caucus unless they have an independent caucus, because I think there's 8 independents now. So it's really, you're relegated to literally the back bench. If you look at the shot, she's up in the top left corner of the House, about as far away as she can be from the Prime Minister. Jody Wilson-Raybould, that is.
Yeah.
I don't know where Philpott is, but it's really an issue.
Amanda says that
right in front of Jody.
Right in front of her.
They're sitting together.
There we go.
There's
their caucus. So, it's going to be a tough 6 months for her to get media's attention, I think.
Right, because she was, even when fired as Attorney General, she was still the Granville South, the Vancouver South MP, and had stated right away, I totally plan to run, and that election is coming up, and that's, this is my future, and my constituents matter to me, and this was her statement right after she was fired. Everybody's like, are you going to continue being a liberal? She's like, oh, yes. And now, are you going to run?
Anyways, so
that was not a no.
No waste.
The challenge she has. Okay, so she went from the most powerful woman in Canada as the Attorney General, and then she got demoted, as we talked about many months ago, even though she denied it at the time. That's not a demotion.
To Veterans Affairs.
A worthy portfolio.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we all know what happened after that. Then there was the hearings, and now there was a recording that happened while we were off.
There it is, because there are some people that were like, hey, I've just totally checked out over spring break.
The recording was the latest.
And now, what do you think about that?
Meeting.
So, Jody Wilson-Raybould.
I listened to the whole thing, which was interesting.
17 minutes and 22 seconds.
And actually, I remember you tweeted something about listen to this part, and I did pay special attention. But I think you and I listened to it differently than you. I think maybe.
Totally. I'm not a politician. I'm a host. I have questions, and things stand out to me as just a tax-paying citizen. That I'm like, interesting. What really stood out to me more than anything was the very audible deep breath she took when starting the phone call. It was like she knew what she was doing in that moment was a massive move. But recording somebody at this level within the government, ultimately that is what got her tossed, according to Justin Trudeau.
I've always said in this podcast and vlogcast is that it's very challenging to trust people in politics. And generally you don't. You always have an apprehension. You have a couple of people that you surround yourself with that okay, these people are good.
Right.
But generally you always kind of, and I'm pretty, I think Amanda is here because she knows that sometimes I go off the rails and I have to be careful sometimes about what I say.
That's what I like about you.
But in politics, being in politics for me was actually really challenging.
Yeah.
But you sort of have to be careful, and even if you're a staff person thinking that, and this was often discussed, you'd say, I wonder if they were recording me. Or even sometimes people in their own caucuses worry about their fellow caucus members. If there's rifts, and caucus meetings are brutal. But, so she did record recorded this conversation.
Why do you think she released it when she did? I guess that's my question. Because we both listened to it very differently, as you said. I am inclined to trust. I want to trust. And then I absolutely look at everything through a lens of what is your agenda? more than are you really doing this for the citizens? It's like, where are we going with this? It's like, if you're giving me something, we must be getting close to an election of some sort, because you only really get something tangible as a taxpayer, in my experience, when the politician needs to be reelected, or there's, I've got a very simplistic view of politics. That's why I hang out with people like you, because then I go, George, I need to understand this about politics. Why would Jody Wilson-Raybould release that?
I'm not going to try and get in the mind of Jody Wilson-Raybould's process on this, and I think that you see how polarizing this issue has become. And you can't even try. I've said a few things on Twitter. Why are you defending the Prime Minister? I'm like, whoa. I'm just sort of putting questions out there. Like, for example, I listened to that recording thinking a lot of this is scripted. It sounded like she was reading, because the difference in her dialect, and I would be interested in having a speech pathologist listen to it and say the difference between her conversational manner and the big chunk in the middle where she's basically saying a whole bunch of stuff about why she's doing this. She's trying to protect the Prime Minister, and all that is sure. I mean, that's the caucus and the cabinet's job, is to protect the Prime Minister 100%. That's your job, is to protect your leader and help your leader succeed, because the leader is what helps you win.
As you said, top down. That's how politics works.
It works. The Prime
what I
Minister's
found
office.
interesting is that she did not really say anything for the first 5 minutes.
He talked.
She went, yep.
And he was very kind of, you could tell he was like, why isn't she talking?
Yeah.
And it was almost like she was waiting for her window then to read her script. And then he went back to, he was like, okay, well, I guess there's not much I can do here. Yeah. I mean, there's obviously a rift, and when trying to, it was a very awkward situation.
The part I found interesting too was when she said, when he said, the Prime Minister, well, he's in a mood, as he does. Running the country. I mean, you get this. Yeah. This is a bit
of pressure.
This is a big clunk in the middle of the plate. So SNC-Lavalin has kind of taken a bit of a backseat, if you will, to this controversy, because it's he said, she said, you've recorded, you've exited, you've been kicked out, you've resigned. Like, there's so much people side of this. What do you think is next? Well, let's start with what is next for Jody Wilson-Raybould.
So many nexts.
I know. Well, I want to know next for SNC-Lavalin. Like, do they get the DPA? Crystal ball.
I would say SNC-Lavalin will be pretty quiet as much as they can be.
Right.
I would say they're not either they're really happy about this process, because they're going to go, okay, the whole potential trial is now corrupted in a way, not as far as how can they feel like they're going to get any kind of fair hearing on this issue. But they may hold off on going on that route until after an election, because I think the last thing the Prime Minister needs, and anybody needs, especially if he looked like he was trying to help them, is more damage. Now what we'll see is Jody Wilson-Raybould is an independent in what now will begin to be an election process. We've got 6 months till the election.
It's a long time.
Yeah, but the strategies are in place for the election. We have 5 leaders of 5 different parties who will all be vying for media's attention. It's going to be very difficult for an independent backbencher who's not a leader of anything to get any attention unless they do really crazy things or are provocative in a way that media go, whoa. I don't get the sense that Jody Wilson-Raybould is going to be doing her whole mandate, her whole message has been ethics. I care about governance and this kind of stuff. And so suddenly for her to start acting like some kind of wingnut, whatever, in some category to get media attention, I don't see that happening. So
might she flip? Could she, walk across the aisle to the NDP? Because they were like, if Jody wants to talk to us, we're here to talk to her.
Well, the question I haven't seen asked or answered by any of the other leaders is, if she was in your caucus, how would you have reacted? Would you have kicked her out earlier or later? I'm pretty sure most caucuses would generally they try. I think the Prime Minister took his time on this, and perhaps there are people who argue he should have done it earlier. But I would say that he knows now that he has the support of the majority of his caucus. He wouldn't do it otherwise, to kick her out, because now his whole focus has to be re-election, and he needed to get this done, as painful as it was.
After trying to spin it 3 other ways, he finally found a way.
And his argument, I was trying to fix it. I was trying to find this.
Totally. So what happens with him? I mean, right after the emergency meeting where he had fired or tossed out both Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott from caucus, he went into the Daughters of the Vote.
Oh yeah.
And
awkward.
Super awkward.
A bunch of the daughters turned their back on him while he was speaking as a protest. And it's very effective. It got lots of coverage. That was kind of the story today. And it was still third, I noticed, on most news packs today. So even after this, all the stuff, now she's, the whole story is kind of going into third spot. By tomorrow, will the Jody Wilson-Raybould SNC-Lavalin be a story still? Will it be a story on Monday? Within 3 weeks or 4 weeks, will we be talking about this all? Or
we'll check in episode 14.
We'll be talking about a whole bunch of other things. And of course, the Prime Minister must have his strategy, and so does Andrew Scheer. They have all their goodies that they're going to start announcing over the next 6 months to get elected.
See, there it is. That's the novice lens of politics for me. It's like, here come the goodies.
Oh yeah.
Always looking forward to hearing
what those
are. Election year, there's an election coming up in just a matter of days on April 16th in Alberta.
That's right.
And no shortage of noise out of Alberta. Even us in BC are hearing what Jason Kenney and Rachel Notley are saying. And there was a time where people were just like, pack up your office there, Ms. Notley, because the Conservatives are coming back into this ultra-conservative province.
Yeah.
And they're going to, like Jason.
40+ years before this.
He's a shoo-in. This is happening. Now, not necessarily.
Yeah, here's a guy who brought together the right-wing parties in Alberta, who for 40 years basically were in power. And now we have had NDP for 4 years, a very unusual situation. And she has taken a different approach. She's increased taxes. Obviously, the economy is sucking there.
Right.
Oil and gas industry has not rebounded. But her approach, in my mind, has been increase taxes, create a kind of a welfare state, in my mind, prop up the economy while we wait for this one industry that controls our province to come back. Jason Kenney's approach in his election campaign is really about, we need to diversify. He wants to steal companies from British Columbia. We've talked about that before. I want to encourage. Let's woo them over with tax incentives. And of course, in BC, where we have an NDP government, where lots of taxes are happening. If you own a business in this province, and this week with gas taxes going up and all these other taxes, there's certainly lots of opportunity for Jason Kenney to encourage BC business and diversify the economy. That's his thing. But in the meantime, the rails seem to be off his campaign.
Because behind all of this is an undercurrent of that ultra
right-wing,
anti
homophobic,
racist, misogynist.
It's very upsetting for to
wives
see that
submit to your husbands. Like what?
Yeah, no.
There are a lot of women voting in Alberta. I mean, and Albertans and British Columbians are very different when it comes to how they vote. Typically, I mean, we're all the tree huggers out here, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of these issues are for most British Columbians are like, wow, it's I saw that when Edmonton.
That wouldn't fly here.
No, I mean, there's an Edmonton councillor, which is great, has taken the motion that came forward to council last year about conversion therapy, banning it in Vancouver.
Please.
Tim Stevenson brought it forward, and I amended it to add complete ban on conversion therapy of all ages. His was 18
upstairs.
18 under. He accepted it as a friendly amendment, and we have a ban on conversion therapy, which is where conversion therapy is where you try to convert people back to being a homosexual or whatever.
If you're gay, you go into conversion therapy and pseudoscience.
Horrible processes, drugs,
ridiculous.
and it's crazy.
It's ridiculous.
So Edmonton, on the one hand, you got this happening in Edmonton literally this week, and then you have this other issue where we have a guy running for MLA in Alberta, clearly has stated very homophobic statements in the past. Mark Smith.
Yeah.
And
that came up yet again.
Came up in other media, and Kenny's standing behind this guy, saying he's apologized. And 14 or 13 days out of an election, 12 days out of an election as of today. So election's on April 16th.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
April 4th today.
A tough thing to decide as a leader to go,
toss
this guy 2 weeks out of an election, or keep him and sort of say he's apologized, and then is Alberta actually okay with some of those things he said? Perhaps it is. Where in his riding, maybe that he speaks, I don't know.
It's an ongoing story that we will keep our eyes on. Of course, we do this podcast once a week, and you can follow at George_Affleck, at Jody Vance, or at UnSpun Podcast. We'll keep the conversation going over the course of the week, and certainly you can tweet at us. We love us some mean tweets. We kind of got a couple mean tweets, and it's been so long since we had it's spring break in between. I'm trying to remember.
Well, I'm getting lots because of the Broadway line. I get a lot of hate on me because I'm very supportive of the Broadway subway.
Why are people so mad about that? I mean,
Well, it's only 4 people as far as I can tell.
Is it?
It's the same 4 people.
It's the same 4 people.
Yeah.
What are they mad about?
They argue, well, they think it's inefficient, it's expensive, and that it's going to create all this density at the stations. And I'm like, yeah. Sorry, Dunbar. Sorry, you're going to have some people living there.
I live 3 blocks off of where it would run right through, and 7 blocks away from where a station would be. And I love the idea. I want to be able to get to where I need to go on transit. I'd love to stop paying the extra $500 this year for my ICBC that I just re-upped a couple days ago. $500 extra.
Oh, is it? Oh God!
Oh my God!
I have a
Nailed
teenager.
it.
Mine's going to be crazy.
It's crazy. I have to spend an extra 10% because I drive a hybrid. I'm like, okay, that's a whole other.
You should sell it and get a new one for get a $5,000
rebate.
Federal government tax.
I should.
Thing.
I love my Prius though. $53 to fill up.
I still got my 2003 minivan. I'm cruising around, so that thing drops till
all
my kids grow up. But I will say there was a tweet that Frances Bueller just related to the Broadway.
Yeah.
She tweeted this piece of stat that came out of she was at some meeting and there were some engineers from city and did you know that the density, population density around Arbutus and Broadway, which is sort of in the west side, is the same density of people living there within a 5-kilometer radius around that corner, where right now is the last station until we decide about UBC. It's currently the same density of population as the same space at Metrotown.
Are you sure?
This is the data is coming from, and so.
Well, you kind of trust Frances Bueller.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think there's there's towers and then there's 3 stories.
Because you think about Metrotown and it's busy, and Arbutus and Broadway doesn't seem that.
And you could argue, well, there's a lot of malls in Metrotown, but there's a lot of towers.
Maybe that's what makes it feel so much like an anthill, is that it's so many parking lots and so many people and coming in, coming out, and the streets feel bigger and wider. And I don't know, but
I think it shows you a gentle density. Exactly, you can put a lot of
people live wherever they want, and if there's more spaces and places to live in Dunbar, yes, Dunbar, because it's a very hollowed out neighborhood right now.
Some of those retailers would like some more people living up there.
You need that. Yeah. Okay, speaking of, perfect segue to, I need you to explain, I think this might be your 3rd time. What is Rental 100 exactly? Just, can you give it to me in the so dumbed down for Jody?
Sure. Okay. Rental, it's a Vancouver-only program.
Yes.
It's an incentive program for developers. And the incentive includes things like reduced parking spaces. You don't pay these development cost levies that you pay. You don't pay the community amenity contributions. A lot of things you don't pay. They fast track you to
permit-wise.
Yeah, but the building has to be a rental building. And it wasn't until about 2013 that they put a cap on the rent rates. Before that, it wasn't, until I started yelling and screaming, and I think Adrian Carr and I were saying, there's no cap on the rents here.
Right.
The intention by Vision Vancouver was to encourage developers to build rental buildings.
Not necessarily affordable.
Well, they sold it as affordable,
okay.
But they were not affordable. They started a thing called STR, S-T-R program. It became Rental 100 because they rebranded it.
I do remember.
They rebranded it because they were getting a lot of trouble with the STR program. They took it, they rebranded it. It was the same program, they just gave it a different name. And then one of the things that I daylighted was the fact that it was only the first renter that we could say that got the reduced rent, and the second renter then was market rent, because they were market rentals. So if you were the
lucky enough person to land that apartment when the building is first filled with people,
yes,
and you all of a sudden got offered a job somewhere else and had to move out, when they re-rent that, they can put it at any
market rate, whatever. It's market rental, and because we don't have rent controls in BC.
What would
so
stop people from being the first renter and then moving out so that they could do that?
They were creating these 6-month leases, and they were saying your lease is up, you're out. We have to renovate your apartment or whatever. And so they're still doing that. The whole program is a mess, and I never liked it. I always argued that if we were already creating market rental apartments through condo development. What we did by subsidizing rental apartments, market rental, was we moved developers' interest in tower developments from tower condos to tower rental. And so it was a wash in my mind. There's no way to really prove it, but in my mind, I always felt like we're just encouraging tower developments in our city, which I'm pretty sure most developers are pretty cool with building almost all the time.
Right.
So we don't really need to encourage that.
More units.
Yeah, but Vision would always argue that, well, we're adding more rental units that are that are, well, they would say affordable, but they're not. They're luxury rentals. But they say their argument was that it's protected rental, which again, it's not, because actually the developer can extract, if they decide they don't want this to be a rental building anymore, they can go back to council and say, we'd like to turn this into a condo development. At that point, they can pay the CACs and the development cost levies, and the council can reverse it if they ask. So
those
it's not
deferments or those waived fees, if they decide, you know what, I've changed my mind, I want this all back now.
Go back to a public hearing and ask for that and pay them all, and so it's not even protected.
So just this past week,
yes.
Why was everybody in City Hall saying George Affleck, George Affleck, and not even people who were in your party?
No, I know, because I've always been very vocally opposed to this program, and I've always said it's not the kind of program that's creating truly affordable rental in our city. It's sure, it's adding to a number which made Vision look good. Hey, we built a certain number of thousand of rental units. The data on strata rental is really hard to figure out, who's renting, who's not renting. A lot of it's hidden.
Yeah.
So Jean Swanson, who is with COPE, which is a very left-wing party, brought a motion forward to end Rental 100. And of course, while I don't like Rental 100, you have to be cautious about how you change policy. And so I would say, okay, well, I get it,
but
let's have a plan. Let's have a plan. And so there were all these people supporting her motion, saying, yeah, like George Affleck said, this is too generous to developers, which I did say. I said that often. And of course, people say, oh, NPA, it's a pro-development. You love developers. Well, I always felt that this was not the right program. It was too many tax incentives for developers that didn't need that tax incentive. That what we should have been doing
Hold on, I got the question. If you were mayor today, George Affleck, what would you do?
Well, I would have, there's so many things I would do. First, to get people building these smaller developments. Smaller developers, we've actually got a new plan that was put in place in 2017 that really provides the ability to build a lot of smaller buildings in our city.
Which we need.
Because those are affordable, they're lived in. Yet the process to get those things through the city takes 5 to 7 years. So if you're a small developer who buys a $2 million house and you have to sit on that thing for 5 years.
Who controls that? Happen. I have no idea. Like, who controls that? Why is it 5 to 7 years? Why?
Well, there's lots of reasons, partly because of just the backlog, because of staffing, because...
Hold on, how many people are in the comms?
Well, there's 43.
Thank you. Drinking game, everybody.
There might be 45 now. I don't know. I'll have to get a new data on that. But let's go with 43 today. Yeah. So they spent all this energy on this Rental 100 program. Plus, we've pushed staff over to all these new taxes that we have. So all these staff are so busy doing taxation issues that Vision created to stop, and I'm much more of an incentive program as opposed to a stick program, a carrot versus stick. Vision was very stick. I'm very carrot. We have no carrot programs in Vancouver to get people, except for the Rental 100 program.
Everybody behind the scenes is laughing at the stick and carrot program.
Which is
that's a good
stick,
one.
and I got my carrot. Hey,
let's write that down with
George. They look the
facts.
same in my invisible hands of sticks.
They do.
Anyway, so the Rental 100 program, really the only incentive program, and it's all about building luxury tower developments for people who can rent at expensive rates.
Doesn't help families.
It makes no sense.
We just need, I keep every single time I drive by that whole Park Casino down or around BC Place, like the development there, how quickly that massive development has happened. Like, if we are so urgently in need of places for people to live, which I believe we are, there must be a way to fast track.
These big developers, they know how to, they have their crews, like Concord, these guys have these crews.
24/7.
And they move from site to site to site. And so they have a system of construction that really is efficient. But Joe Schmo, who wants to build a fourplex in southeast Vancouver, Joe Schmo just not going to get it done in 5 to 7 years without bankrupting his entire family, and so they don't do it. And they're wood construction, so they're environmentally. We have the cost of to build is about $200,000 per unit, just in taxes and fees, no matter what the unit. So you can't even the math is just terrible.
Oh, it's so complicated. Something tells me we'll be talking about that some more. We got 3 sort of quick hits that I want to get to, if that's okay. What we're looking at, well, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, and we didn't talk about this beforehand. The whole brouhaha at the BC legislature about the right to bear arms, wearing tank tops. Did you see that?
Yeah. I was like, what did that come from?
It's wild. As somebody who
I know in news, it's quite a big deal, isn't it? Isn't that sometimes a controversy that they don't want you wearing sleeves or sleeves?
I don't know. No one's ever told me not to wear sleeves or to wear
I've
sleeves.
often thought about walking around without sleeves.
I'm not
guns.
I'm not a bare arms kind of person, but I think you should be able to wear whatever the heck you want. What I found interesting is that they did change that archaic policy that women aren't allowed to wear a blouse that stops with a cap sleeve or sleeves or what have you. I found it interesting that it changed really quickly.
This is where Twitter was so helpful.
Yeah,
because people tweet pictures of the Queen of England.
Right.
In her, I think it was her inauguration, or I don't know what it was.
Well, she was
and
definitely
there she was,
in an official capacity.
How dare she wear that crown
so unprofessional.
And that dress with those sleeves.
I know.
I thought, okay, well,
Crazy.
Clearly I don't understand any of this, but somebody in Victoria really doesn't understand.
I just can't wait for the actual real stuff to come out of the BC legislature, like what's the update on the suspended clerk and sergeant at arms and that whole brouhaha, because I haven't heard anything about that, but boy, we know about the dress
code. It's been so many weeks since we talked about it.
I feel like forever. Okay, so, but there is some news out of our provincial government with regard to Finance Minister Carol James putting forward, I guess a couple days ago, the beneficial ownership registry, which is no longer being able to sort of hide who owns a property under a numbered company.
I was surprised. I thought this was something that did exist. I mean,
why wouldn't it have existed?
Because I worked as a journalist, and I guess I used to go, when I worked, I'd go and I'd get the records, but it was generally for single, it was people, and they were in the names. People.
Right.
And so
but also maybe it was something that was at a different time, because there's more and more of this in the money laundering. Well, we're about the same age, George, so we're both old. Yeah.
I wear it worse, I guess.
But thanks.
Yeah.
But
so the company's name, so the way it'll work will be a company name, but you'll have to put the owners of that company on the registry.
Yes.
Okay.
So that you can maybe follow the money. What a concept.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I think it's good. I mean, I think it may create some people fighting privacy concerns, but I don't know if I'd want to be that person fighting that one.
Not now.
I'm pretty sure public support for this would be quite high.
We love your support, so you should follow along, maybe subscribe to the podcast. It drops every Thursday, Friday-ish. We try and get it out there Thursday evening at theorca.ca. My column on the Orca this week is actually a really tough topic. It's on medical-assisted death. Medical-assisted in death.
You're all
and the
over the map on your
well, I try to not talk about what everybody else is talking about,
good.
but I'm doing a BC Care Assessment, or BC Care Providers Association talk on Friday, where both sides of this really heavy discussion are coming together, have an open dialogue on it. It's not televised or anything. It's just so everybody can have the information that they need, because it doesn't matter where you stand on it. You need to know about what the laws are, what is happening right here and right now in our country with regard to those laws, and the people that are involved in this, how it is affecting them, how it affects families. And, I have a father with late stages Alzheimer's. I believe that if he knew where he'd be today, which I say in my column, he would have made provisions in his will. You can't do that at this point. It's a very specific and strict where you can utilize this particular program. And I just want to get more info on it. So there's another thing to chime in on. So at George
_Affleck.
Yes, at Jody with a Y Vance, at UnSpun Podcast. You can download us anywhere, right?
Download us on all the podcast networks, and then watch us on YouTube, which you can, and subscribe below.
I'm Jody.
I'm George.
See you next week.
Thanks.